All right, newly released photos show some of the powerful people who were in the orbit of the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. President Trump is included in some of the pictures. In one photo, he is seen smiling with 6 women whose faces are redacted. In another, he is seen with Epstein at some sort of social event there. Other power players in the photos include former President Bill Clinton, billionaire philanthropist Bill Gates, and former Harvard President Larry Summers. None of the images released depict any sexual misconduct, nor are they believed to show underage girls. And none of the pictured men has been accused of any wrongdoing. I'm joined now by Neama Rahmani. He is a former federal prosecutor and president of the West Coast Trial Attorneys. Neama, great to see you, as always. So let's dissect what we know. About 90 photos from a trove of some 95,000 images from Epstein's email were released by Democrats in the Oversight Committee. So what do these images say about any potential road ahead in an investigation, maybe?
Fred, the optics are terrible, but these aren't the Epstein files. These are from Epstein's estate. And of course, the House Oversight Committee, they do have subpoena power. The Epstein files we're hoping to get from the Department of Justice tomorrow. But at a minimum, they're images of rich and powerful men rubbing elbows with a convicted pedophile. So certainly a bad look, obviously not enough for a criminal case or a civil lawsuit. We need an accuser for that, but definitely the last thing anyone wants is to be associated with Jeffrey Epstein. So these pictures are pretty damaging to their reputation.
And then no context was really provided with these images. So as these images are being released from the estate, but what does that say and what should that mean to people?
Well, it's tough because obviously, Trump and other individuals here, they were friends with Jeffrey Epstein. So you have that association. Now, there are some emails and other documents that suggest, obviously don't prove, that they may have known that he had or was sexually abusing young girls. So that's the next step. Of course, the worst would be actually participating in those sex acts. I would expect that we're going to see more of these types of redactions. Obviously, most of the women who are in these pictures, their images, they're blacked out. Now, we don't know if they were victims. The Democrats in the House Oversight Committee seem to suggest that they wanted to take a very broad view of those redactions to protect the identity of anyone who may have been a victim of the sex abuse. So the question is, when we do get the Epstein files, are we going to see similar redactions next week and the following weeks?
Yeah, okay. And are you feeling confident that the DOJ is going to meet that deadline of next Friday to make public, its investigative files about Epstein? Or at the same time, do you see that this release by, some Democrats of these images from the estate as kind of like a safety net? If they don't meet the deadline, then just kind of know there's this ultimatum. There is more stuff that they might have access to. Is that how this is being played out?
Fred, I'm not confident at all, because if the DOJ wanted to make the Epstein files public, they could have at any time. They hold the privileges, the law enforcement, the deliberative process privilege. They didn't need the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Pam Bondi, with a stroke of her pen, could have made those materials public. And we're talking about the materials from the first and second Epstein prosecutions, as well as the Ghislaine Maxwell prosecution. So the fact that these promises were made by Trump, Bondi, Patel, and others, and those promises weren't kept, I don't have a lot of faith that come next week we're actually going to get everything in possession of the Department of Justice. I hope I'm wrong, but I think we've been down this path a very long time. And I think the American people, they're also skeptical. And I think images like this, they do play into those conspiracy theories that there's a cover-up to protect Jeffrey Epstein and those who were associated with him. So in the interest of transparency, I hope the DOJ does what they're supposed to, but I'm still skeptical.
All right. Neama Rahmani, great to see you. Thanks so much.
Great to see you, Fred. Have a great weekend.